Ambassador Li Hyun walked slowly through the massive doorway into the council chamber. The room was unlike anything on Earth. The walls stretched up so high he couldn't see the ceiling, made from some kind of white stone that seemed to glow. From within, everything was perfectly clean, almost sterile, like a hospital that had never seen a single patient. 7 enormous creatures sat in a circle around the center of the room. Li had seen pictures of them before, but being here in person was different. The hegemony leaders were made of what looked like living crystal, each one the size of a small building. Their bodies shifted and changed color as they moved, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Right now, they were all glowing with a deep red light that made Li think of anger, or maybe hunger. The largest of the 7 beings spoke. First, its voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the floor and into Li's bones. "Human representative," it said, drawing out each word like it tasted bad. "You have been summoned to receive the final judgment of the hegemony of 7 suns." Li stepped forward to the center of the circle. He was a small figure compared to these giants, barely reaching what might have been their ankles if they had ankles. His simple black suit looked tiny and insignificant in this grand chamber, but he stood straight and kept his face calm, the way his grandfather had taught him when facing bullies in the schoolyard. "We have watched your species for many cycles," another crystal being announced. This one pulsed with blue light as it spoke. "You have spread beyond your birth world. You have built weapons. You have formed alliances with other species. This cannot be allowed to continue." A third alien, this one shifting between purple and green, leaned forward. The movement sent waves of colored light across the ceiling. "The galaxy has an order," it said. "The strong rule, the weak serve. Your species has forgotten its place in this order." Li said nothing. His hands were clasped behind his back and he focused on keeping his breathing steady. He had been trained for this moment for years, but no amount of preparation could really ready someone for standing in front of beings who considered themselves gods. The red crystal being spoke again. "Therefore the hegemony has reached a decision. Your species will submit completely to our authority. You will dismantle your military. You will abandon your colonies. You will serve as our subjects, as is proper for a lesser race." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Li felt the pressure of 7 pairs of alien eyes watching him, waiting for him to break down, to beg, to show the fear they expected from a primitive human. Instead, he asked quietly, "And if we refuse?" The crystals all flared brighter at once, filling the chamber with blinding light. When Li's eyes adjusted, he could see that several of the beings had grown larger, their forms more angular and threatening. "If you refuse," the largest one said, its voice now like thunder, "we will reduce your worlds to ash. We will hunt down every human in the galaxy. We will erase your species so completely that even the memory of your existence will be forgotten." Another alien added, "We have done this before. The Karathi thought they could resist. The Velans believed they were special. The Nexus Empire once spanned 100 systems. Where are they now?" The being's laughter sounded like breaking glass. "They are dust scattered across dead worlds." Li nodded slowly, as if considering this information carefully. "I see," he said. "And how long do we have to make this decision?" 30 rotations, the blue crystal declared. 30 of your days to accept reality. We are being generous because your species shows promise as servants. Do not waste this gift." 30 days, Li repeated. He looked around the circle at each of the 7 aliens in turn. "That's quite generous of you." The largest being seemed pleased by what it took as submission. "You understand then, good. Many species require much longer to accept their fate. Your intelligence serves you well." Li took a small step forward. "I do understand," he said, "but I'll need time to prepare our response properly. 1 hour should be sufficient." The crystals dimmed slightly, confused by this request. 1 hour?" the purple-green alien asked. "To prepare what response? The choice is simple, submit or die." "Nevertheless," Li said, his voice as calm as if he were ordering coffee, "I'd like 1 hour to craft our reply. Surely beings as powerful as yourselves can spare 60 minutes. The 7 aliens looked at each other, their forms flickering with what might have been amusement. Finally, the largest one gestured with something that might have been an arm. Very well, human. Take your hour. Use it to compose a proper letter of surrender. We will reconvene when you are ready to deliver your capitulation. Lee bowed politely. Thank you for your patience, he said. Then he turned and walked out of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind him, the crystal beings settled back into their positions, already dismissing the small human from their thoughts. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Captain Hanmira stepped through the airlock onto the Nexus flagship and immediately felt like she had walked into a nightmare. The corridor stretched ahead of her for what seemed like miles, lined with towering alien warriors on both sides. Each one stood perfectly still, their weapons held at attention, but she could feel their eyes tracking her every movement. The Nexus warriors were built for war. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick, armored skin that looked like it could stop bullets. Their faces were angular and sharp, with 4 eyes that glowed a dull orange in the dim light of the ship. Each warrior carried weapons that hummed, with barely contained energy, and their armor was covered in scars that told stories of countless battles. Mira walked between them, her boots clicking softly on the metal floor. She was a small figure in her simple blue uniform, looking almost fragile compared to the massive aliens surrounding her, but she kept her head high and her pace steady, as if she took walks through enemy warships every day. The corridor led to a massive chamber that could have held a football stadium. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and the walls were covered with weapons and battle trophies from 100 different worlds. In the center of the room, hundreds more Nexus warriors stood in perfect formation, creating a living amphitheater around a raised platform. Commander Zorth waited for her on that platform. He was even larger than his soldiers, standing nearly 10 feet tall with arms that looked like they could crush steel. His armor was black and covered in symbols that probably represented his victories. When he moved, the other warriors tensed, ready to act on his slightest command. So, Zorth said, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber, the humans send us a single messenger. He looked down at Mira with something that might have been amusement. Tell me, little creature, are you here to surrender on behalf of your entire species? It would save us considerable time. Mira stepped onto the platform, bringing herself slightly closer to Zorth's eye level, though she still had to crane her neck to look at him. I'm Captain Hanmira of the Terran Defense Force, she said clearly. I'm here to speak with you about your planned invasion of Earth. A ripple of laughter went through the assembled warriors. The sound was harsh and grating, like metal scraping against stone. Zorth raised one massive hand and the chamber fell silent immediately. Planned invasion, he repeated, his 4 eyes glowing brighter. There is no plan, human. There is only inevitable conquest. Your world will fall within days of our arrival. Your people will serve the Nexus Empire, or they will die. This is not a matter for discussion. That's where you're wrong, Mira said, her voice calm and steady. Everything can be discussed. That's what separates civilized beings from simple predators. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Several warriors took threatening steps forward, but Zorth held up his hand again. His eyes were now burning bright orange, and the scars on his armor seemed to pulse with their own light. Civilized, he snarled. You dare lecture the Nexus Empire about civilization? We have conquered 1,000 worlds while your species was still learning to make fire. We have built an empire that spans half the galaxy, while you humans played in the dirt of a single planet. Mira nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I've read about your empire. Very impressive. Lots of conquered worlds, lots of enslaved populations. But I noticed something interesting about your expansion pattern. Zorth leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over her. And what is that, little human? For you only attack species that can't fight back effectively, she said simply. Oh, you make it sound grand with all your talk of conquest and empire, but when I look at your target list, I see a clear pattern. You pick on the weak. You avoid anyone who might actually hurt you. The chamber erupted in angry roars from the assembled warriors. Several of them started forward, weapons charging, but Zorth's bellow stopped them in their tracks. His voice shook the walls when he spoke again. You think your pathetic species can hurt the Nexus Empire, he demanded. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are toys. Your entire military couldn't stand against a single one of our battle groups. Maybe, Mira admitted with a small shrug. But here's the thing, Commander. You've never actually tested that theory, have you? You've spent so much time conquering easy targets that you've forgotten what it's like to face someone who might fight back. She took a step closer to Zorth, close enough that she had to tilt her head all the way back to meet his eyes. That's why I'm here. Not to beg, not to surrender. I'm here to offer you something your empire hasn't had in centuries. And what is that? Zorth asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Mira smiled, and there was something in that smile that made several of the nearest warriors unconsciously step backward. A choice, she said. You can turn your fleet around right now and go home, or you can continue toward Earth and find out what happens when you pick on someone your own size. Captain Han Mira stood in the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien warriors who towered over her like living mountains. The silence that had followed her words lasted only a moment before it shattered like glass. The laughter started with one warrior in the back, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the metal walls. Then another joined in, and another, until the entire chamber filled with the cruel amusement of the Nexus Empire's finest soldiers. The sound was deafening, like standing inside a thunderstorm made of mockery. Commander Zorth didn't laugh at first. He simply stared down at Mira with his four glowing eyes, as if trying to decide whether she was insane or just incredibly stupid. When the laughter of his warriors began to die down, he finally spoke. "Turn around," he repeated slowly, tasting each word. "You want the Nexus Empire to turn around and go home?" His voice carried a note of genuine disbelief. "Little human, do you have any idea what you're saying?" Mira nodded calmly. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm giving you a chance to avoid a war that you cannot win." This brought fresh waves of laughter from the assembled warriors. Several of them were now pointing at her, sharing jokes in their harsh, alien language. One warrior near the front was laughing so hard he had to lean on his weapon for support. Zorth raised his massive hand, and the chamber fell silent again. When he leaned forward, his scarred face came close enough to Mira that she could feel the heat radiating from his armored skin. His breath smelled like metal and fire. "Cannot win," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Human child, let me explain something to you. The Nexus Empire has never lost a war. Not one. Do you know why?" Mira waited, knowing he would continue whether she answered or not. "Because we don't fight wars," Zorth continued, straightening to his full height. "We conduct exterminations. When the Nexus Empire decides a species needs to be conquered, that species ceases to exist as a free people. It's not a battle. It's not a conflict. It's a simple fact of physics, like gravity or entropy." He gestured to the walls around them, covered in weapons and trophies from countless victories. "Do you see these relics, human? Each one represents a species that thought they could resist us. The Corvani had ships that could travel between dimensions. The Thekmar could manipulate time itself. The Zentari Empire controlled weather on a planetary scale." Mira looked around at the collection of alien artifacts. Some of them were beautiful, crafted with obvious skill and artistry. Others were clearly weapons of incredible power, though they now served only as decoration for Zorth's personal trophy room. "Where are they now?" Zorth asked, his voice growing louder with each word. "The Corvani serve in our labor camps. The Thekmar exist only in our history databases. The Zentari worlds are mining colonies, stripped of everything valuable and left as empty shells." The commander began to pace around Mira, his heavy footsteps making the platform shake. Each of these species believed they were special. Each. One thought their technology, their culture, their determination would be enough to stand against the Nexus Empire. Each one was wrong. He stopped directly in front of her again. "And now you, a single human from a species that hasn't even managed to properly colonize your own solar system, stand here and tell me to turn around and go home? You offer us a warning?" His laughter was like breaking stones. "What exactly are you warning us about, little creature?" Mira remained perfectly still throughout his speech. Her hands were clasped behind her back, her expression calm and attentive, as if she were listening to a lecture at university, rather than threats from a warlord who could crush her with one hand. "I'm warning you about making the biggest mistake in your empire's history," she said simply. This brought more laughter from the assembled warriors, but Zorth held up his hand for silence again. There was something in the human's tone that intrigued him, a quiet confidence that seemed completely at odds with her situation. "Mistake?" he asked. "What mistake could we possibly make? Your species has no significant military. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your entire planet couldn't produce enough soldiers to crew a single one of our dreadnoughts." Mira nodded as if agreeing with him. "You're absolutely right about all of that," she said. "Our military is small, our technology seems primitive compared to yours. We don't have vast fleets or planet-killing weapons." She paused, looking around at the hundreds of warriors surrounding her. "But you're making the same mistake that every other empire in galactic history has made when they looked at humanity, and—" "What mistake is that?" Zorth demanded. Mira's smile was small and sad, like someone delivering news they wished they didn't have to share. "You're assuming that what you see is all there is," she said. "You're thinking that because we appear weak, we actually are weak. You're believing that because we seem primitive, we're actually primitive." She took a step closer to Zorth, close enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his glowing eyes. "But most importantly, you're making the mistake of thinking that just because we've been quiet, we've been idle." Warlord Vrex felt his patience wearing thin as he stared at the small human woman on his view screen. Captain Kim Sora sat in what appeared to be the command chair of her tiny vessel, looking completely relaxed, despite facing the largest invasion fleet the Crimson Empire had ever assembled. Her casual attitude was beginning to irritate him in ways he hadn't expected. "Human," Vrex growled through the communication link, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. "Perhaps you did not hear me clearly the first time. We are not here for negotiations. We are not here for trade agreements or diplomatic talks. We are here to take your world by force." Captain Kim tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words with genuine interest. "Oh, I heard you perfectly, Warlord Vrex. Your intentions are quite clear. You've brought what looks like about 3,000 warships to my little corner of space. That usually indicates conquest rather than a friendly visit." Vrex's forearms gestured impatiently at his tactical displays. Each screen showed formations of his most powerful vessels, dreadnoughts and battle cruisers that had reduced entire civilizations to rubble. "Then why do you sit there so calmly? Why do you not flee in terror? Why do you not beg for mercy?" "Well," Kim said, settling back in her chair like she was getting comfortable for a long conversation, "begging has never really been my style. And as for fleeing," she shrugged, "where would I go? This is my home system, these are my people. Running away never seemed like much of an option." The warlord leaned forward in his command throne, his red eyes glowing brighter with frustration. "Your people will die, human. All of them. Your cities will burn. Your ships will be scattered like dust in the void. Your entire species will serve the Crimson Empire or cease to exist entirely." Captain Kim nodded thoughtfully, as if he had just shared an interesting weather report. "Yes, that does sound like the typical Crimson Empire approach. I've read about your previous conquests. Very thorough, very efficient. You certainly don't leave much to chance." "Then you understand," Vrex said, some satisfaction creeping into his voice. "You know what fate awaits your world." "I understand." "Your plan, certainly," Kim replied. "But I have to admit I'm curious about something. The Galactic Assembly has maintained a quarantine around our system for nearly 3,000 years. Did they ever explain to you why they did that?" Vrex waved, one of his hands dismissively. "Ancient bureaucratic nonsense. The Assembly is weak, full of species who prefer talking to fighting. They quarantine primitive worlds to protect them from stronger civilizations. It's a foolish waste of resources." Kim's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that what they told you? How interesting. And you believed them?" "Why would I not believe them?" Vrex demanded. "It makes perfect sense. Primitive species need protection from advanced empires like mine. The Assembly coddles the weak instead of allowing the strong to claim what is rightfully theirs." Captain Kim was quiet for a moment, looking almost sad. When she spoke again, her voice was gentler, like a teacher explaining a difficult concept to a confused student. "Warlord Vrex, in all your years of conquest, in all your studies of galactic history, have you ever encountered a species that the Assembly felt needed to be quarantined for 3 millennia? The question caught Vrex off guard. He accessed his military databases, searching through records of assembly policies and procedures. No, he admitted after a moment. Most quarantines last a few centuries at most, until a species develops interstellar travel. Exactly, Kim said, leaning forward in her chair. 3,000 years is a very long time to maintain a quarantine, don't you think? It requires constant monitoring, regular patrols, significant resources. The assembly doesn't do anything that expensive without a very good reason. Vrex felt a small nagging doubt begin to form in the back of his mind, but he pushed it away. What are you suggesting, human? That your primitive species is somehow dangerous to the galaxy? Kim's smile was sad and tired, like someone who had carried a heavy burden for far too long. Warlord Vrex, let me ask you another question. When you broke through the quarantine barriers, when you destroyed the warning beacons and ignored the Assembly's territorial markers, did any of your advisors suggest that maybe, just maybe, you should find out why those barriers were there in the first place? The warlord's confidence wavered slightly. His military advisors had raised concerns about violating assembly space, but he had dismissed their worries as cowardice. The Crimson Empire feared no one, especially not the weak-willed bureaucrats of the assembly. The barriers were there to protect you, he said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Were they? Kim asked softly. Think about it, Warlord. 3,000 years of constant quarantine. Warning beacons that broadcast in 17 different languages. Automated defense platforms that fire on any ship that approaches without authorization. Does that sound like a system designed to protect the people inside? Vrex stared at the human woman on his screen, and for the first time since arriving in this system, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest. Uncertainty. If not to protect you, he said slowly, then why? Captain Kim's expression grew even, sadder. The quarantine wasn't established to protect us from the galaxy, Warlord Vrex. It was established to protect the galaxy from us. The massive chamber had fallen completely silent. Not even the hum of the ship's engines could be heard as hundreds of Nexus warriors stood frozen, staring at the small human woman who had just turned their understanding of the galaxy upside down. Commander Zorth's four eyes were wide with something that might have been fear, though he had forgotten what that emotion felt like after centuries of conquest. Captain Han Mira stood in the center of it all, looking tired and somehow older than she had when she first stepped aboard the flagship. The weight of what she had just revealed seemed to settle on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She had spent the last hour systematically destroying everything the Nexus Empire believed about human capabilities, and now she had to live with the consequences. 200 years, she repeated softly, her voice carrying easily in the absolute silence. That's how long we've been preparing for this moment. Not just preparing weapons or ships, though we've done that too. We've been preparing for the day when someone like you would finally decide that Earth looked like an easy target. Zorth tried to speak, but his voice came out as a harsh croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. Impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected massive military buildup. Our spies would have reported fleet movements, weapon testing, industrial expansion. Mira nodded, as if she had expected this response. Your spies reported exactly what we wanted them to report. Your intelligence network saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Commander, do you really think a species capable of the things I just described would be sloppy enough to let you discover our preparations by accident? She began walking slowly around the platform, her hands clasped behind her back like a professor giving a lecture. The nearest warriors automatically stepped back to give her room, though they probably didn't realize they were doing it. Every time one of your scout ships entered human space, we knew about it before they cleared the jump point. Every time. Your intelligence operatives made contact with human traders or diplomats. We fed them carefully crafted information. Every report your empire received about human military capabilities was designed to make us look weak, primitive, and harmless. Zorth's massive form was trembling slightly, though whether from rage or shock was impossible to tell. Why? He demanded. If you possessed such power, why hide it? Why not announce your strength to the galaxy? Why not claim your place among the great empires? Mira stopped walking and looked up at him with genuine sadness in her eyes. Because we learned something that your empire never did, Commander. We learned that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use it. She gestured to the trophies and weapons covering the chamber walls. Look around you. Every artifact in this room represents a species that couldn't resist showing off their power. They built great fleets and announced their strength to the galaxy. They made themselves targets. And where are they now? They are conquered, Zorth whispered, understanding beginning to dawn in his alien features. Exactly, Mira said. They are conquered, enslaved, or extinct. Because the galaxy has a way of dealing with species that become too powerful, too visible, too threatening. Empires like yours rise up to tear them down. It's happened over and over throughout galactic history. She took a step closer to Zorth, her voice becoming more urgent. But we chose a different path. We decided to be the species that everyone underestimated, the harmless little humans who stayed on their one planet and minded their own business, the primitive species that posed no threat to anyone. While secretly building an empire of your own, Zorth said, his voice hollow. Not an empire, Mira corrected. We're not interested in conquering other worlds or enslaving other species. We built something else entirely. We built a defense network. So sophisticated, so powerful, that we could protect ourselves from any threat while appearing completely harmless to the rest of the galaxy. She spread her arms wide, encompassing the entire chamber and, by extension, the massive fleet beyond. And it worked perfectly for 2 centuries, right up until you decided to test it. Commander Zorth stared down at her, his 4 eyes now dim with something approaching despair. "What are you?" he asked again, his voice barely audible. Mira's smile was infinitely sad, like someone saying goodbye to a friend who was about to make a terrible mistake. "We're the species you should have left alone, Commander. We're the sleeping giant that every empire in galactic history has been smart enough not to wake up. Until now." She looked around at the assembled warriors, many of whom were now backing away from her as if she were radioactive. "You came here expecting to find sheep," she said quietly. "Instead you found shepherds, and we've been guarding this flock for a very long time." Turning back to Zorth, she made her final offer. "You have one choice, Commander. Turn your fleet around right now and never return to human space. Pretend this conversation never happened. Go back to conquering species that can't defend themselves, and leave us to our quiet little corner of the galaxy." "And if we refuse?" Zorth asked, though he already knew the answer. Mira's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something cold and final. "Then you'll discover why. The rest of the galaxy has been smart enough to leave us alone.